Welcome to today's meeting. This is the second formal meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Emma Powley and I'm the Head of Governance and Statutory Scrutiny Officer. We're not expecting any fire alarms to be tested today, so if anything does go off, there's an exit here and there. Can I kindly request that when you use your microphones, you turn them on and then off when you've finished addressing the committee? Even though I know some of us have met before, I think it would be really helpful if we just did a quick introduction. I'm Emma, and this is Michael. And if we could just go around the room, if that's okay, with officers and then councillors. So, Michael, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Michael Rich. I'm part of the interim team at the Combined Authority, providing a bit of capacity. I'm here to speak to the item on the Inclusive Growth Commission.
Morning all, Jason Zadrozny. I'm leader of Ashfield District Council, have been since 2018, and I am leader of the independent group on Nottinghamshire County Council, where I've been for 17 years.
Councillor Stuart Swan, representing Derbyshire County Council.
I'm Sam Gardner. I'm councillor for Ballwall Forest on Nottingham City Council.
Good morning. I'm Boyd Elliott, Nottinghamshire County Councillor, representing the Calverton Ward.
I'm Councillor Georgia Power, represent the Bestwood Ward on Nottingham City Council.
I'm David Hughes. I'm the councillor in Matlock East and Tansley, and I'm representing Derbyshire Dales District Council.
Morning, I'm Abby Brennan. I'm the Deputy Leader of Rushcliffe Borough Council.
And again, good morning, everybody. I'm Kevin Gillard from North East Derbyshire District Council, representing the districts and boroughs in Derbyshire.
Morning, everybody. I'm Chris Poulter from Derby City Council.
Morning, everybody. I'm Neil Wilson, rep of Chaddeston North, Derby City Council.
Thank you, and I think we've got just one more person who's joined us today.
Hi, I'm Andy from Mansfield District Council.
Thank you very much. So this next item, first item on the agenda, is to appoint the chair of the committee for the 2024-25 municipal year, taking us up to the end of April 2025. Just to clarify, there was a little mistake in the agenda that states that Councillor Zadrozny is Derbyshire County Council, which should, of course, say Nottinghamshire County Council. Apologies. So the process for nominating a chair has been set out in the committee report and requires that anyone who qualifies as being a chair indicate their interest. If there is more than one, we will ask those members to provide an introduction to themselves and why they believe they should have the role of chair. We will then, if needs be, look for a mover and a seconder and a vote if there is more than one. Can I ask if any members here wish to express an interest in the role of chair? Councillor Poulter. And Councillor Zadrozny. Okay, Councillor Poulter, do you want to give a quick update?
I can do, by all means. Morning, everybody. I'm Chris Poulter. I'm representing Derby City Council. I've been a councillor for about 18 years, representing Spondon Ward. In my time at the council, I think I've sat on every scrutiny board there is going and chaired most of them along the way. I'm currently chair of the Executive Scrutiny Board at Derby City Council. I was leader of the council at Derby City Council until May last year. And also during my time as a councillor, I've sat on the LGA scrutiny boards and the East Midlands Council scrutiny board. So got quite a long history in terms of scrutiny, but also a lot of experience having been leader of the council for 5 years. And in the course of that, from the beginning, I was involved in discussions around the seeking to form a combined authority across the East Midlands. And the main debate, or a lot of the debate, being around whether Leicestershire were involved. They weren't. They didn't want to be eventually, and as a result, we are as we are with Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, and the two cities. So, along with Barry and Ben and David Mellon, most of the time, I was involved in the initial proposals, looked at the potential agreement, worked that with the department. I was one of the signatories to the agreement, but obviously when losing the role of leader of the City Council a year last May, I'm no longer involved. But I also got, whilst I was leader of the council, I was a member of the D2N2 LEP, a lot of which the work that's carried out there, and I think it's on the agenda for the meeting on Monday to decide what happens with the LEP agenda and once that's wound up. So I've some experience there. And I think I can come to this role with an open mind. I read the forms that we've got, and I totally agree that we shouldn't be setting ourselves up as an opposition to the mayoralty and to the board. I think scrutiny in general suffers from too much politics, and if we can keep this board or this committee to a more positive and make a valued contribution to the combined authority, I think that will be a good thing, because we need this to work. All the trouble we've gone to and the lack of investment from the East Midlands in the past. We can learn from areas like Manchester and West Midlands. Again, they got a mention in the budget yesterday. We should aspire to take the same sort of powers that they have and be ahead of the game across the country in terms of I was at the LGA conference and there was a lot of discussion around the fact that this government's intention is to make combined authorities across England, and they will be coming, but we're ahead of the game in that respect. So I hope that it will work, it'll work well, and I think we can make a valued contribution towards that. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. So I opted to put myself forward. I'm one of the few people eligible, I believe, under the rules of the Constitution, for a number of reasons. Obviously, those of you who don't know me, I've been a councillor a long time and have been passionate about our area, our geography for a long time. So actually, although I'm Nottinghamshire councillor, I cut my teeth working for an MP in Derbyshire. So I had a long time of, that's where I learnt my politics and got passionate about our communities. And I think this is a really good time for me to be involved. I've just finished 2 terms, one as the Vice Chair of the District Councils Network to a Conservative chairman, and as Vice Chair of the Resources Board for the Local Government Association to a Labour chairman. I've just stood down after my 4 years as leader of the independent group on the East Midlands Councils, so I've got a lot of personal time to put into this committee, which is obviously being in its formative stages to make sure it works for you and your constituent councils and is responsive in the way you want it to be. I think I have a really positive relationship with the Mayor, and I think, as Councillor Poulter says, we want this to be a constructive, inclusive scrutiny committee that's passionate about you members being able to get the answers, hold the administration to a constructive account, but also be there as a board that finds ideas and offers them up as real solutions. And I'm really passionate about that, and that's why Ashfield District Council has been recognised as having excellent scrutiny by the public bodies. They've been recently audited by the Local Government Association and by the Centre for Public Excellence as having excellent scrutiny. It's something we put a lot of work and effort into. But I think you also need a chairman that recognises that this is not similar to district, borough or county or city scrutiny. This is going to be a very different beast, and as we form it together, I think we need somebody who understands that. Finally, I think perhaps somewhat irrelevantly, but this is the only role in the entire East Midlands Combined Authority where an independent is eligible to be a chairman. I would be the only non-Labour or non-Conservative chair of any committee in the entire board. And I think if there was a committee to do that, I think it should be this one. I think scrutiny should be seen to be as an impartial and as inclusive as possible. And I think those of you who do know me know from my work on chairing things like the Community Safety Board at Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Authority, I have a really open, inclusive way of working. And I think it should be a really positive experience for us all. So I hope you'll consider lending me your support today. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Where's that? It. No, in that case, I need a proposer and a seconder for Councillor Poulter.
I'll happily propose Councillor Poulter.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Swan. And can we go to the vote, please?
Can I have a clarification on who can vote?
It is the constituent members only.
Yeah. And can I have it minuted then that, the district council representatives, so it's going to be a common theme, that we're here at the table, but we don't feel properly included. I think we'll continue to make that theme because, the district council voices should have a voting representation.
Thank you, that's noted, and it will be minuted. Thank you. So, could we have a vote in favour of Councillor Poulter, please? 2, 4, 6, 7. And against? Any abstentions? I'm afraid that's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Poulter. You're more than welcome to sit up here and bring your nameplate or stay where you are. It's entirely up to you. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, we don't want to ruffle feathers, so that's great. So the second item on the agenda is the election of vice chair for the municipal year 24-25. There are no restrictions on who can be nominated as vice chair. Again, I will ask anybody who wants to put themselves forwards as vice chair for the role. Councillor Boyd? Anybody else? Might as well go. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? Yep. And a seconder? And can we have a vote, please? All those in favour? 5. Any abstentions? Any against? Councillor Boyd, welcome. Sorry, Elliot, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I was a bit familiar though. So the next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Councillor Power?
Obviously, I haven't got apologies today, but I've given apologies to the last 2 meetings and will give apologies to a further 3 meetings because it clashes with Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny at Nottingham City Council, which I chair. If you've read the news, you'll be aware that there is lots going on in Nottingham. I've asked repeatedly for this meeting to be moved so I can attend and haven't had responses or just been told that the dates have been set. Asking members here if we can look at whether we can move the dates so I can attend, because at the moment I think this and one other I can attend. Every other single meeting I have clashes for.
Thank you. I think it's for the committee to decide whether or not they're happy to have a look at the meeting dates. They were agreed. I know that I have communicated with you and said that all constituent councils were consulted with our calendar, and I know that I do understand that it's not particularly helpful for you, but unfortunately that is the state that we're in, and this happened before I was, in post. But I'm led to believe that prior to our calendar being agreed, all constituent councils were consulted on.
I have checked and it was all constituent councils were consulted on whether they clash with their full council meetings because members hadn't been appointed yet. This doesn't clash with our full council meeting but does clash with other committees.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I would support Councillor Power's suggestion that we at least have a look at the dates. I know that some of them do clash with the Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Authority meetings, which are important meetings to which at least 2 people on this committee have been appointed. So I think if we could just have a look at it, see if we can find some more suitable dates, that would help.
And I'd like to support that. It was something we brought up. I know you weren't there at the initial meeting about the times, because the nature of the people who are on this committee, I know the fire, I think for me it clashes with East Midlands Employers Board and a couple of LGA things as well. So I'd be really, Chair, through you, like to look at the time we meet, and also I'd like to look at where we meet, because, and this was brought up at the initial meeting, because it sort of adds a level of stress having to find a new part of Derbyshire or Nottinghamshire, and I'd be quite happy, you know, for it always to say be in the same place, whether it be Derby or Ripley, and in the same place in Nottinghamshire, just to strip out that level of stress that there is in always going somewhere different.
Sorry, if I'm okay through you, Chair. This has been something that Councillor Power has also mentioned in emails, the fact that it's difficult for people using public transport, which is definitely something that we're going to think about. SLT are going to be considering where to hold meetings in future, because I do recognise that it is difficult for people who, you know, don't drive and things like that. So that is something that I'm going to be looking to do in terms of the future. With regards to the timing, the actual time of the meeting, I'm not sure how flexible we can be with that. I think 11 o'clock is the standard for all meetings of MCA. I think there is also, I think there will be a revisit of whether or not that we could find one location. I think the idea was that we'd go to different areas to make it more accessible for members of the public. Unfortunately, they're not here today, but for members of the public who would wish to, you know, participate in meetings, and to make it accessible for more councillors as well.
I agree with what's been said. You know, with a committee like this, it will always be difficult to find a day when we can all attend, because you've got busy people coming here. But I think the dates that have been chosen, you might struggle in the future to have a quorum, and therefore the committee might not function. So I'd agree if we ask the chair and vice chair to go away and look at this, and perhaps consult with us informally at the next informal meeting that we've got in a month or so's time, and then we can discuss it there and come up with something that will work, because the very worst scenario would be that the committee never functions because you can't get it as a quorum, because you're clashing with so many other meetings.
Thanks, everybody. It's on my list of things to talk about when at the appropriate point. Can I just say, firstly, Andy, I take your point in relation to the representation by districts, but we are what we are, and the rules have been set, and that's what we set out, and we have to abide by those rules. But I'll do my damnedest to make you feel included in the discussions, and we'll take account of everything that you and the district members have to say on the subject for what it is now. Okay. So turning to the things that we've just talked about, the venue. Venue today is very central, but it's a new venue for a lot of people, and it's a new venue to be able to park and stuff. So I absolutely take those points in mind, and the dates also. I'd intended, if I was elected as chair, to speak to you, Emma, about that. And I think Kevin's. Is it all right if everybody, if I refer to first names? Is that okay? Slightly less formal. Kevin sort of stole my thunder in the suggestion that Boyd and I and yourself, Emma, could sit down and perhaps email out to everybody to get the major clashes in the dates for the next year, and where they're, and so that we can understand where the clashes are, and maybe also your home address location in terms of the geography, because I think we need to make this committee as accessible to us all as possible. And I take the point that we absolutely need to be correct when we meet. So, and with the frequency of the meetings, I think everybody here would want to attend as many meetings as possible. There aren't that many in a year, so we ought to be able to find a date. There'll be holidays, there'll be other reasons why, but I too have a clash with the Police and Crime PCP at some points. So if it's okay, Emma, we'll meet with Boyd and myself, and once we've got that information out, if you could send out to all the members asking those details, so location and clashes, and then we can collate it and see what we can come up with. Is that all right with everybody? Okay, good.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, thank you. So the next item is apologies for absence. As far as I'm aware, I haven't been informed of any apologies other than from Damien Dacey, Deputy Chief Executive, who is unable to attend today, but we have Michael Rich as his representative. Next item is declarations of interest. Any? None? Thank you.
Is it all right if I take it from here? Yes. Is that okay?
Of course, yes, thank you.
Okay, so that leads us on to item 5 and public participation, which was a subject I wanted to raise. Obviously, we've no questions or members of the public attending today, Emma. And that's fine for what it is. It's the first and almost inaugural meeting of this committee, but there has been interest in the main board. I think there have been questions. And I'm interested to make sure that we are live today on the meeting. We need to get the message out to the public that we are here and they can attend, and if they have items that they want or would like us to consider scrutinising, I think we should encourage that. Along with the rule, of course, in relation to the 30-minute rule and whatever. And the procedure of that, I mean, how does it work at the main committee, Emma? Do they ask the question or do they get an answer and then a supplementary question? How does it work?
So currently, if you submit a question, you will get a written response to it. And we try to publish those on the website before the actual meeting, because if you are in attendance and you ask the question, you also have the opportunity to ask a supplementary. But your supplementary question must relate to the answer given to the original question. So it has to be of the same thread. So, for example, that there has to be a link. And that's obviously limited to 30 minutes. And that's pretty much it.
So pretty much in line with standard public participation in most councils?
Yeah.
Is that in line with most people's councils? I think it probably is. Okay. Any other thoughts on the public participation? No. Moving on, Inclusive Growth Commission. I think that's why Michael's here. Welcome to the board, and thank you for attending. I think it probably links in with the agenda for Monday as well, in relation to helping us to understand a bit more about what will be on the agenda on Monday. And I think I'll cover that later, Emma, in terms of how we go about, because even the dates is important. Up until now, some of the meetings, it seems, might have been scheduled for after the main board. I think it's important that we get the opportunity to look at the agenda for the board in advance. So again, that might be another factor for looking at the dates and suitability of the dates in terms of enabling us to carry out proper scrutiny. But for now, Michael, thank you for attending. By all means, brief us on the Growth Commission, because I think this is something that the Mayor has probably established. So we'd like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And again, just to reiterate the apologies that Emma conveyed from Damien. He was hoping to join online, and the technology's not been possible. So glad to have been able to step in, but apologies you don't have Damien here. And again, I'm afraid I'll probably need to leave just before midday. Hopefully this item will be concluded by then, but just so that you'll hopefully forewarned of an exit at that point. Hopefully committee members are aware that the last meeting of the MCA board 16th of September, approved a package of 5 interlinked pieces of work that together will really set out the basis for EMCA's long-term strategic approach to how it will deliver its inclusive growth objectives. And one of those 5 pieces of work was to establish an inclusive growth commission, and the outline terms of reference for that were in the board papers in September as an appendix to that report about the regional strategy. So I was just planning, Chair, if it's okay, to give a very brief sort of recap on the purpose of having a commission, where we are in the process, and an indication of the next steps, and then obviously very, very happy to take any questions or comments through you from the committee. The purpose of establishing this, there's a few things to note here. Firstly, this commission would be independent, so that would be a really important feature of it and its work. It's deliberately being set up in order to be able to provide some challenge and some challenging thoughts, both in terms of its analysis of the challenges and opportunities and the recommendations that it makes. So it will issue its report independently. Clearly, there will be lots of opportunities for stakeholders, including the board and committees, to feed in, but it will be for the Commission to issue its recommendations as an independent body. It will be taking a long-term view, so it will be looking to really get under the skin of understanding what some of the causes and conditions are of challenges that the region faces with regard to inclusive growth, and also identifying opportunities, particularly opportunities that may be open to the region. Now, it has a combined authority in place and the potential to bring more levers and powers into the region that haven't been open to it before, and take a long-term view in doing so. As set out in the September board paper, the core kind of question for the Commission is around what EMCA and its partners can do to drive growth and productivity whilst tackling inequalities, be they social, economic and environmental, that we are all well aware of in the EMCA region. And this will all then inform the regional strategy. That strategy will, of course, be owned by the board. So the Commission is independent. It will make its recommendations independently. The board then will obviously take a view as to how it takes that into its strategy. So that's very broadly the aims of the Commission and its purpose. Where we are at the moment is having had approval at the board meeting in September to that package of work. We're working towards a formal launch of the Commission, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, so that is imminent. We're just lining things up for that at the moment. That will include confirming the commissioners, as the board paper in September set out. We think that will probably be around 8 or so not a huge number. And that will be a mix of local commissioners and national figures, and it will be aimed at trying to provide a real range and breadth of different expertise and experience that those commissioners will bring. And again, people that we are confident will bring some challenge and some independent thought to the challenges that we face in the region. We're also setting out the overall programme for the work, getting into the detail of planning and how we're moving at the moment from the sort of phase 1, setting things up, getting things going, doing that planning and working a programme out, into phase 2 of the work. And that will begin to assemble the evidence base of pulling together existing research, looking at where the gaps are, setting out a programme for developing more evidence and analysis of that, and setting out a programme for engagement and wider engagement in the next phase of the Commission's work to support its overall objectives. And engagement will be a really, really key feature of how the Commission will go about its business. And so what we're planning now and thinking about at the moment is who and how that engagement happens. It's likely to include at least a robust and wide-ranging citizen survey. So we're keen to get that sort of wide view through a survey or series of surveys and direct engagement with people that work and live in the region. But also absolutely important that the Commission finds a way to engage with the wide range of stakeholders across the region, groups and individuals that can give a view and inform its thinking. And that engagement will continue into the third phase of the work as the Commission begins to establish its recommendations and proposals. So it will be engaging in order to help build its understanding, what is perhaps underlying some of the challenges, what the people think the opportunities are, and it will be engaging as it shapes its thinking on the proposals and the recommendations that it might be seeking to make. and in doing so, hopefully securing some really strong partner commitment to those proposals that it ends up recommending. Throughout that programme, it will be engaging with the board and its committees, and so it would be good to get any thoughts this committee has as to what shape it might want that engagement to take. We're doing that planning work now, so it's very timely to get views from the committee as to how it might see engagement with the Commission and or the officers that are supporting the Commission's work. Finally, then, in terms of the next steps that we're moving into, as I say, the launch within the next couple of weeks, we haven't got an exact date, but that will be happening imminently. The engagement plans will get underway and the programme set out for that. There is a slightly revised timeline from that was set out in the September board papers in order to make sure that we give the Commission sufficient time to do a really decent piece of work here and to bring real value. But what we are still insisting on really is that we have some interim findings coming out early in the new year so that we can feed those in to the spending review process that will be underway and very live within central government. So whilst this is a long-term view, 10, 15, 20 years, how do we tackle these challenges? We're also mindful there are short to medium-term opportunities as government is doing a 3-year spending review process. We need to be feeding into that. So the Commission will be doing some interim findings at the point that we can feed those directly into what EMCA will be submitting into government as part of the spending review thinking anyway. So those will be interim findings early in the next calendar year for that purpose. And then we would expect a fuller sort of set of final findings coming through in the summer. And again, there will probably be a sort of formal launch of the findings at an appropriate time once it's worked its way through and those recommendations from the Commission have been finalised. Hopefully that gives a kind of view of what it's about, where we're up to, what's happening next. As I say, very happy to take questions and comments on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Obviously, it sounds like a very important role for EMCA in itself, so it needs to work well and it needs to work in a quite timely fashion. You could spend a long time doing consultation and whatever, but there is, as you pointed out, a need for some urgency in setting the plan. I was going to say questions. Yes.
Thank you, Michael, for that overview. One of the issues that is arising here is the tie-up between economic development and housing. Now, we've got a new local plan coming in, and with the new NPPF and the new method of determining the number of the requirement for housing, our housing requirement has more than doubled, and it leads to a possibility of needing a new small town by 2040, about the same size as Matlock or even Ashbourne. And this has implications. One of the issues is, where are the jobs going to come from for the people who are going to occupy these houses? So will you be looking at the tie-up between housing policy and economic development? Because the two will be, with the new housing targets nationally, will be so interdependent that we can't do one without the other. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Very valid point, and I'm sure there'll be many other issues around the table that we might like the Commission to bear in mind. But for the moment, we're looking at the process and maybe feeding in about how we can, one of the things you asked about, Mike, was how we might, any thoughts on how you might go about the consultation, the feed in around issues could perhaps come later, Michael?
Thank you. Yes. Well, there's certainly, I think it is helpful to have suggestions around sort of content and focus and scope now as we're planning things. I think one of the things I would point to in response to that, as I said at the beginning, this is one element of a sort of package of pieces of work that EMCA will be leading on. Another one of those is thinking about a sort of spatial plan, and that's exactly, I think, the place where some of those connections between housing needs, demands and opportunities, economic growth and the jobs, and the infrastructure critically that needs to sort of support that social and physical infrastructure. will come together. I think the policy position of the new government's still evolving as to how it sees combined authorities putting those plans together, what they might look like, what basis they might have. I'm not sort of super close to that, but that has been identified as a critical element that will need to link to what the Commission come forward with. And so there will be an interaction between the work of the Commission, the work that's going on in that spatial plan, and one of the other elements is a sort of more immediate growth plan that really responds to government's industrial strategy, etc. So there will be consideration of that. It is a critical element, yeah.
Any other thoughts, questions? Yes, Andy.
Yeah, it's in the title, inclusive growth. So my hopes for the East Midlands Combined Authority was to do things a little bit different from central government. We talk about the East Midlands being left behind, and then regions within the East Midlands also being left behind. And a lot of that reason is because schemes are always judged against the Green Book. And if you think about that benefit cost ratio, it will always lead to areas where land values for development will put those projects high up the list, which is kind of one of the things that we're hoping to challenge, with social value being included, because otherwise you'll get the same regions, areas of those regions being left behind. And that's not what I would call a fair, inclusive growth strategy. And so, my challenge is that this is an opportunity to do things not the same that have been going on for decades that have led to this area being left behind. So that's my challenge.
Sandy, did you want to come back on that, Michael?
If I can, Chair, yeah, thank you. Yes, just a couple of things. I think absolutely the aim is to empower an independent commission to think differently, bring different thoughts and thinking through to the challenges and how to respond to them. As I said earlier, clearly it will then be for the MCA board and the decision making to decide which of those recommendations it takes forward, but the commission is set up to do exactly that. The second thing I would just note really is that one of the drivers for doing the work in this way is looking back to what happened with the Manchester Independent Economic Review, which is going back about 15 years now, but it paved the way for the devolution that's been seen since in Greater Manchester. One of the things that did was precisely as you indicated, was to give some challenge to the metrics, to how these things are measured and captured. And that did have an influence on Treasury and others at the time. So I do think there are opportunities there. Obviously, it will be for the Commission to take a view. So I think I would encourage those representations to come into the Commission. It will certainly, I think, be empowered to take that sort of view where necessary to challenge the metrics and the measures. And there is some precedent there, I think, in terms of how that's fed through. Clearly, we will still be there will still be some constraints around how investment decisions are made, but I think that is certainly in the mix to reconsider that in order to drive a more inclusive approach.
Yeah, the reason I raised it is that the interim strategic investment framework that's been signed off by the Shadow MCA board in March this year specifically refers to methodologies following the Green Book. So if we've got that in our strategic framework for starting out, I can't see how the Inclusive Growth Commission would be taking a broader view on it, because we're not even setting it out as a strategic aim. So that, again, that's my challenge on that. And I suppose that strategic framework never really got discussed in detail by overview and scrutiny in the first place when it could have been raised.
I guess you're right, Andy. I don't think he would have been, because that part of the process was done in preparation for this, for the establishment and the placement of the new mayor. So there may be things in there as things develop. We might need to look at those as we go along. Sorry, you wanted to come in. Could you mind introducing yourself? Welcome.
Thank you, I will. So first of all, just to apologise profusely to the committee, the trains were incredibly unkind to me this morning. So I'm really sorry about that. My name is Nick Bell. I'm the Interim Director of Finance here at EMCA. And I just wanted to just raise another point, if I could do, in response to the point that Councillor Abrams made, which I thought was a very, very, sort of a good point. One of the things that we're working on as well is the development of a new single assurance framework. And one of my colleagues, Jodie Townsend, who's our Interim Director of Law and Governance, is working very hard on that one. And what that will do is it will look at how we take decisions. So that will look at actually what degree do we look at the Green Book and what degree do we look at social value and other factors as part of that. So the Inclusive Growth Commission will set outcomes, but actually it's then down to EMCA and the board to decide how those outcomes are utilised. And the aim is absolutely to bring that revised single assurance framework before it's adopted back through overview and scrutiny. So you will have an opportunity to input into that one. Now, unfortunately, I don't know the exact timelines that Jodie Townsend is working to on that, but I can get back to you in relation to it and make sure that the whole committee have that detail in relation to that work following on from this meeting.
Okay, so Nick, thank you for that. Can I take it then that the Green Book is a starting point? That's the basis for the arrangements and the governance of it, but the Commission can and the whole of EMCA can consider the social impacts as well.
That is absolutely the aim, and at the moment the Green Book will be one of those areas that we start to look at in terms of basing things around it, but it certainly won't be the only thing that is taken into account in relation to that. So hopefully that's given the committee some sense of certainty and security. We'll look at wider issues as well.
Okay. Yes, Georgia.
Thanks. For future items, would it be possible to have a written update, an actual sort of measurable outcome, so timelines, what you expect to achieve? Because I'm not really sure what we've achieved in this. It just feels like it could have been a written paper. So it would be useful to know what we're trying to achieve when we've got items on the agenda.
Just to say that in the future we will, I think, try and make sure that we get as much provided to the committee in advance, either written papers or presentations, as I say, in advance of each of those. Because I think the Inclusive Growth Commission has been something that's been sort of shaping itself. We wanted to make sure you had the most recent update. We will in the future endeavour to get written papers to you at least a week in advance of the meetings.
Abby, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Michael. Great, inclusive growth plan all sounds fantastic. I don't want to sound cynical, but we've already discussed that we've got spatial plans, we've got local development frameworks, we're all working towards our own local plans at various points, and somewhere these things have got to talk to each other, for want of a better phrase. And public consultation will presumably take place on all of these plans. So I fear for the weariness of the East Midlands public being asked continuously similar questions about the same patch. In order for us to scrutinise whether this has genuine impact or is adopting the correct approach, we're going to have to see how it talks to those other plans. We can't have a standalone spatial plan, a standalone economic plan, standalone growth plan, a growth plan that talks to the government's growth strategy. We really need some coordination, or we're just going to be forever disappearing up our own fundament producing strategies. So I guess I'd like at some point some reassurance about how all those plans are going to link together and what the timetable will be to ensure that that's possible.
Thank you. Yes, so I think on those 2 points, the very high level view of how they'll fit together was set out in the paper at the September board, but that doesn't go as far as your point about timetable and process and the mechanics of how that works. So I think that is something we'd need to come back and set out. On the first point about engagement and sort of consultation, engagement fatigue, completely recognise that. My understanding of the programme is that the intent would be to take some soundings first, particularly amongst sort of local authority partners, to understand what's already being asked, what's planned to be asked. Are there some kind of common questions where we've already got a baseline and the same form of question would be helpful or not? So the intent is to liaise and engage around the form of a survey before just banging something out. Now, that won't completely solve the, the potential for fatigue and over-consultation and over-engagement, and it's only one part of a wider engagement programme the Commission will undertake, but hopefully it should mitigate some of those issues. And it might identify opportunities that actually the Commission may not need to do that because a certain authority or groups of authority are already planning to ask similar questions.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Can I ask then, if notwithstanding the fact that we might be changing our meetings timings, that we get an opportunity to have a look at that communication and consultation plan on this committee, if possible, with the timings?
I'll bring Michael back in, but yeah, it's obviously, Abby, we're going to be considering our own forward plan in before the end of this meeting. Maybe it's something along those lines, or maybe the Commission as a whole, and consider how, because one of the things we're asked to do as a scrutiny board is to add value and to look at positively at what's going on and see if we can contribute towards things like the establishment of the Commission. So it might be, Michael, that we choose to include the establishment of the committee and engagement with it, the Commission and engagement with it in our plan. You'll be able to respond to that, and maybe commissioners attend and take the views of this committee.
Yeah, so I mean we've got the existing committee dates. Obviously, given the earlier discussion, they may change. So we'll make sure, if they haven't already got it, that those supporting the Commission have got those dates, and obviously there are a range of other committees that are also in place where there'll be a need for some engagement. And then we can look with yourself at what items it would be timely to sort of bring back in line with your committee's timetable. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? I got just a couple of questions, Michael, on what you was telling us. 8 commissioners. Are they appointed on a voluntary basis, and who appoints them?
Yeah, there would be on a voluntary basis, to the best of my understanding, and they would be appointed jointly by the Mayor and the Chair of the Commission. So the Mayor's having a role in the appointment of the Commission, but as I say, it will then form its view and act independently in terms of its work programme, its analysis and its recommendations.
Sorry, Michael, again, you did touch on it, but the makeup of the commissioners, independents from partner agencies, from communities, what's the mix?
Yeah, it's still being finalised at the moment, but the idea is to have a sort of wide-ranging mix of people that have got a real expertise and wide perspective across the whole sort of spectrum of challenges that are facing the region, and able to bring expertise and experience to the work of the Commission. From that, there will be some of those who are local and are sort of bedded in the local partnership landscape, but a number of others who will bring national sort of standing and expertise from a wide range of different sectors. So we do get that challenge and those different voices coming in to the region as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Andy, you want to come back before we, bearing in mind the time and the fact that Michael needs to move on, but go on.
I mean, it's at the beginning where you have most influence. So it's the criteria about the invitation, what we're actually looking for, which I think we'd be interested in, because that will give us an idea of the type of people that would be attracted to the role. So I think that would be really useful to say that this is how we're asking for the people, to bring themselves forward. And I just want to endorse the other one about the citizen survey. I think it will be better to really look across the board at all the spatial things. So you look at all the crossovers beforehand. So it's not just a very another general survey that goes out there. It already takes into account some of the conflicts between spatial and local plans across the region, for it to be of use.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know how it works in other authorities particularly, but I do know that Derby City Council, for example, because we know just how difficult it is to get the public to engage in surveys and increase the level of interest for MCA as a whole. But I do know that Derby City Council, we have a bank of a register of people who are prepared to look at council issues and council surveys and give an independent view. If that's the same across the region with other councils, then maybe that's an area in terms of engagement that you could focus on and improve the numbers in terms of responses. Okay, good. Well, I think that's been useful. Thank you very much, Michael. What we're going to move on to is considering the items on the agenda for Monday for the main board. Are there any items on there that you have particular knowledge of or would want to engage with us on there, save us asking some questions?
Yes, thank you. So I had the most involvement in the board item for Monday around the visitor economy, Chair. So I'd be very, very happy if it's helpful for the committee. If there were any comments or points on that, happily respond or take those as best I can before I have to shoot off. So thank you.
Perfect, thank you. By all means, if you want to, I think we've concluded item 5 and we'll move on to, sorry, it was item 6 and we can move on to the review of the MCA reports for Monday. The visitor economy is actually third on the agenda, but I'll not hold you for that. So if you want to go first and just give us a quick upshot from yourself in relation to your understanding of that.
Yeah, happy to do that, Chair. Hopefully, committee members have had an opportunity to read the paper. It primarily provides an update to the board following the board's approval for some early work across a number of areas, of which a sort of regional visitor economy strategy was one of those. So it's mainly providing that update on the work that's been done to date and the sort of emerging thinking around the role both for the combined authority and how the combined authority hopefully will work with the existing partners. It recognises that it's quite a sort of messy landscape at the moment in terms of organisationally, and there is a need to make sure that there is at least some stability and continuity into the next financial year in line with the sort of 1 year review that we've just had through the budget yesterday, but also that MCA has been set up to provide that sort of leadership around potential change and improvement to the system to give more coherence and coordination. So it sort of indicates that will be a key piece of work through into the next year to see what further improvements can be made, notwithstanding this area has had a fairly recent government review that sort of set out quite a framework for those organisations. And then thirdly, it also seeks endorsement from the board to a process of developing destination management plans. So this is part of what Visit England expect in every part of the country now. And we have agreed with the existing sort of visit organisations that would make most sense to do as a joint process. So that's not trying to pull everything up to a sort of regional level. It's still recognising there will be different things appropriate for different geographies, depending on the nature of the visitor economy opportunities and the assets. But it is trying to do it in a more joined up, coordinated way, and at the same time identify where there may be opportunities to do things more effectively with more impact at the level of the MCA geography. So that process will be getting underway shortly. The Combined Authority will be supporting that, and that will be a joint activity. It also helps, I think, to help embed a process of collaboration across the existing organisations, which is already in a good state, but I think can go further in order to recognise the opportunity we have for the visitor economy. So that's, in a nutshell, the purpose of that paper, Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Very useful. Obviously, the visitor economy is vital, not just to the counties, although a lot of the agencies are set up in the county. They're also vital to the cities, and I think it's something that MCA's right to look at. Can I ask, Michael, if you know, are the agencies involved there Are there any funding issues? Are they reliant on the shared prosperity fund or whatever? Because they'll need some certainty going forward in terms of funding to be able to move on properly.
Yes, so there are funding challenges, and again, as EMCA was set up, it doesn't have sort of devolved budgets for the visitor economy, so it's having to look at what it can do to help mitigate those funding challenges. There's another paper which I'm sure you'll come on to around the Shared Prosperity Fund, and that recognises exactly the challenge that you've set out, that there need to be timely and early decisions. Obviously, the paper was written before we had the budget announcement yesterday, because that was just the timing of the paper cycles, unfortunately. We know a bit more following budget around that there will be a successor to UK Share Prosperity Fund. It will be a reduced amount nationally, so we wait to hear what that means more locally. But that paper, that separate paper on UK SPF recognises that challenge and proposes to the board there is an early allocation to some of those organisations that act at the sort of regional, sub-regional level strategically, so that we don't find that they're facing that challenge of instability going into next financial year. That doesn't sort of solve all of the funding challenges we have in this area around the visitor economy, so we do need to be working again with partners on a more sustainable model, and part of that needs to be, in my view, continuing a conversation back into central government as to, again, using our influence there to make the case for this having more stable funding than it does at the moment.
And that goes into other areas such as inward investment and skills and the LEP obviously being wound up. That gave the growth board some certainty. It's allocated 380,000 towards that. But there are other areas that are important to the economy across the board that will need to be addressed. So, yeah. Thoughts? Yes, Georgia, I got a hand.
Sorry, this is on UK SPF, but while you're here, have we actually had confirmation that it's going to continue after the cycle? So the budget papers that I've seen say that it got an extra 900 million this year, but then there's nothing about a successor. So have we had confirmation that there will be a successor going forward in a year's time?
It looks like Nick might be able to help us with that one.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, I can't give you any certainty because that's part of the spending review that the Chancellor is looking at now, and that will be announced sometime later in the spring for future years. So we've got, as you say, the certainty, £900 million nationally for this coming year, which is obviously a significant reduction from the roughly £1.5 billion that's been spent nationally, which is about 60%. And we don't know yet, because there's always devils in detail, exactly how that will be allocated, what our proportion of it will be, the split between revenue and capital. Will we be able to spend it on the same things? There'll be a whole set of work that we hope to find out before Christmas. But as always, after the budget starts a process but doesn't always finish it. We need to find out from the department. But we certainly don't have any certainty around what will come beyond next year. That'll be part of our work, I think, working jointly as well with all of the local partners in the area to make sure that we try to get our voice heard within government about what's important to us. And the continuation of some of that funding, either the way it comes at the moment or maybe in different ways beyond that stage.
So the devil will be in the detail, I'm afraid, Georgia, won't it? Yes. Abby, do you want to go first? And I saw your hand first.
Thank you. I mean, I welcome this approach to managing tourism. It is disparate across the area, and it has been for decades. And I really welcome the Mayor making this one of the priorities. However, and it relates to UK SPF, which I know there's lots of variables we can't predict at the moment. But paragraph 3.6, the second part of that paragraph in the paper talks about UK SPF, or implies or infers UK SPF has essentially been part of the issue of the fragmentation of the delivery of tourism and tourist facilities in the patch. And I'm just a bit wary about this. I just want to flag up that I think that boroughs and districts themselves have a very important role to play, and some of the smaller tourism, museums, smaller little local facilities and tourist attractions that we have that can create internal economic dynamic in terms of people coming into our boroughs and districts and staying there a bit longer because they're aware of some of the local facilities. They may not attract huge numbers from outside the area, but they're nonetheless extremely important. And I'm just a bit nervous that we don't end up with the resources that UK SPF, which was really, really valuable for some of the boroughs and districts, particularly, not exclusively, but it was one of the few things of flexible funding that we had, certainly for areas like Rushcliffe, that I would not want to see it all sucked up, and that flexibility and ability to recognise some of the small tourism gems and visitor attractions we have in our boroughs and districts lose that important investment. So I just want to flag that up, if I may, Chairman.
Thanks for that, Abby. I'm sure it will come up in the conversation when we get round to the discussion on the shared prosperity fund. Andy, I'm happy for you to put your thoughts, but on your timetable, Michael, we've not got much time left, and we sort of hijacked you over this. So, Andy, did you want to? You got something you wanted to put?
Yeah, I mean, we've strayed on to shared prosperity, so we may as well be dealing with it now. Oh, you want to? Well, we'll leave it till then. Just because we'd strayed onto it, I'll come back.
Any other final thoughts from Michael on the visitor economy before we let him go with our thanks for his input? No? All right. Thank you, Andrew. And Michael, sorry. Thank you very much. Right. Moving on then, we'll go back to the agenda for Monday and go back to the top of the list in terms of the investment fund spending proposals. I don't know who's going to input from this. Nick, will that be yourself?
Very happy to do that very, very briefly. It's, one of the things that was announced and confirmed yesterday was the East Midland Improvement Zone, together with the funding allocations for the first year of that. We expect that over the course of time, that will yield up to around about £160 million, a split of revenue and capital. But this is a proposal for the first year to enable us to really start to do some work about accelerating some of the R&D work, some of the work we need to do on skills in those areas, and to commission pieces of work that will enable that to happen. So I'll probably leave it there if I could, Chair, and then happy to take any questions. Again, some of them I may need to take away because I'm not, well, I know a little about the finances of this, I'm not necessarily always the expert in relation to the operational side.
I appreciate that, Nick. Thank you for your input. One of the things I noticed in the report was that the proposal is that the main board start to look at proposals for schemes within the from the investment fund at their next meeting. So they're obviously not that far down the line in terms of the development of the bids or the proposals. But that's a good thing in that perhaps gives us opportunity to look at what sorts of bids and proposals they are looking at in advance and see if we can input to it. Has anybody else thoughts on the paper and what the main board will be considering on Monday?
Yeah, I mean, it refers to the MCA assurance framework as the sort of criteria. So we spoke about that a little bit earlier. So that very much ties into having an idea of what a shape of the schemes that might be included. So that I think that's really an important part. And also talks about £1 million revenue to develop a pipeline. So it would be interesting to know, again, is that what is that pipeline in terms of duration? How far into the future are we looking? Obviously, at the 9.5 million, I imagine we're looking at things that can be done sooner, in accordance with the strategic framework. So some more detail, because obviously that's a fair chunk at £1 million going out to look at that pipeline. So some more details on that would be really useful.
Okay, Andy. Sorry, yes, by all means, Paul. Thanks, but I'll bring you in a second, Nick. That's all right. In relation to that £1 million, I read that as I know we're not, or the AMCA's not a continuation of the LEP, but there are procedures that the LEP had in terms of seeking proposals and bids and developing a pipeline. And I know from experience of that they are quite intensive pieces of work, and often these roles are set out and given to other bodies for support, other organisations for helping developing the pipeline. But my query, if anybody knows this, Nick, is what the expression, the sprint process, is that to do with the timeliness of it and trying to get something done in this year? Nick?
If I could comment on both of those, I think the phrase sprint process is one that's generally used with a lot of these mechanisms, and it's very much around a sort of iterative process that starts and then works its way through to look at actually what the best solution is going to be, the best set of projects, and maybe starts with a wide range of them and then comes down to a slightly narrower number that ultimately get funded. And coming back to the area around the timelines on this one as well, the aim of this is very much to, I would suggest, gap fill, because longer term we will have the Inclusive Growth Commission we talked about. Longer term we'll have a whole set of different objectives and we'll have a different set of strategic plans. But actually in the here and now, we need to find mechanisms to identify the projects to support through the investment fund. And this is very much around how we do that, and working very closely with all of the, not just constituent council, but all of the local councils across the wider area, all 19 of them, to make sure that we've got that ability to understand what are the best ones for us to do that fit strongly with our strategic direction. I think that's the key thing for us as well, that we need to make sure that it's something that's going to have strategic sense longer term as well. So hopefully that's helpful there in relation to that. But I think the word sprint, as I say, is not so just because it's quick, although we want it to be quick, but it's also that iterative process that sort of starts and works its way through.
Thank you for that, Nick. It wasn't an expression I was familiar with. So any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick thought about where in the development cycle we would be looking for projects, or the EMCCA would be looking for projects. Would it be at the initial preparatory stage, or would it be downstream from preparation? And I'm thinking really here that preparatory starts with site development, getting rid of recovering brownfield sites, that sort of thing, through to going to market for organisations, companies going to market with particular products. Is there a view at this stage of where in that cycle the funding is likely to be allocated?
I think at the moment we want to keep it as wide a range as we can to see what the opportunities and options are coming through from that. And I mean, the issue is very much about what are the things we could be doing in the short term now to actually help us deliver our longer term strategic objectives. And if some of that is early stage, well, we'll have a look at that. If some's late stage, we'll look at that as well. So I wouldn't want to constrain it. I think at the moment through there, I know that colleagues will be coming up and talking to people from all of the, as I say, local authorities over the course of the next few weeks, on the assumption this approach is approved by the board on Monday.
Okay. I think that we've covered that as far as we can at this point. So we've touched on any other thoughts on the visitor economy before we move on again? No? So, Shared Prosperity Fund, we should fully cover that, I guess, although we've touched on it. Andy, I think you were at a point on Shared Prosperity Funding?
Yeah. I suppose from a district council point of view, this is the one that gives me the gravest concern. It's the only funding that was prorated across the whole of the country on community, skills and employment, and it really allowed district councils to target with some freedom and flexibility the things needed for their local area. And it's been a lifesaver. We've got hundreds of community projects that would have gone to the wall if we hadn't have received this funding. So my concern is that out of all the funding that will be coming in different directions into EMCA from investment and all different directions, that if this the replacement of whatever is sucked up into the EMCA funding machine, district councils, that localism and some freedom and flexibility will disappear, and a lot of local business support schemes, skills and community projects will suffer or even go to the wall. So yeah, that's my real plea, that this is actually looked at differently from the wider thing. I mean, if you just talk about one aspect, the visitor economy, it's a huge project in its own right. So the shared prosperity was very targeted, and there's some freedom and flexibility. So I would hope that EMCA, if it comes in charge of that, retains that flexibility.
Andy, thanks for that. I absolutely get your concern around, because the Shared Prosperity Fund that was effectively devolved to districts and obviously has been very useful to you. I think my reading of this paper is that it's to consider probably a lot of those projects that are ongoing and how we support them to make sure that they come to a suitable conclusion. But I also get the impression, I think it's been set up, that there will be a regional approach to any future SPF funding. And I get the district council's concern around that. Nick, is there anything you want to say in addition to that?
Thank you. Just to comment on a couple of things, if I could. The first of which is, of course, at the moment, as we sit here, we don't yet know exactly how the allocations are going to be in terms of next year's SPF. We know that nationally it's 900 million. I don't know whether or not that's going to be just prorated, so everywhere gets 60% of what they did previously, or whether there's a different mechanism, because we don't even know the split between revenue and capital on that. There could be significant different things, and they're also, we understand, going to issue a prospectus, which will say the sort of things that we can invest in, the sort of things that we can't. So I really wouldn't want to sort of give too much, because we simply don't know at the moment in terms of actually what we can do on that one. I think I would point to the decision of the board back in September, where actually they considered this and they decided that probably the best way to approach it was a hybrid approach, with some funding continuing around individual areas through districts, and some funding potentially coming in where it made sense to do that, to have a more centralised, a more regional approach to those things. And I think what this is doing is it's sort of starting to take that forward in a set of discussions for the board to think about, really, rather than anything else, about how it sets some of that framework, how much for that funding, once we know what it is, should go for local issues and local areas that are currently being supported. How much could we actually say makes more sense maybe to take a more regional approach? So there's certainly nothing set in stone at the moment, and I'm no doubt the board will have an interesting discussion on this on Monday as well, through there, and and I'm sure they will take on board the comments, not just from yourself, but from other district and borough colleagues as well at the meeting.
Yes, Chair.
I think the one thing that we do know, in the mood music that's coming out of Treasury at the moment, they're talking about needs-based allocations, which is going back to more like we had with the structural funds, rather than the current sort of general allocation per RAF.
Yes, David.
Thank you. Just to perhaps amplify what Councillor Mayor Abraham said, there is an issue about representation of district councils on EMCA, and I think that, aligned with the potential removing of some of the funds that the district council are currently getting through UK SPF, is a concern, because the district councils aren't then able to make the representation, perhaps with the strength that the higher level councils can make about funding. And the concern is that, therefore, the funding that was going to district councils at the moment will be absorbed into the county councils and the municipal boroughs and so on. And I can understand why, because the county councils in particular are so short of funds. So I think I'm worried as the Derbyshire Dales councillor, as Mayor Abrahams is as well, from his perspective.
David, I would hope that the district and borough representatives on the board itself, whilst they don't have a vote, would be in a position to make representations, and hopefully you're all feeding to them what it is you want them to represent on this subject, because I can absolutely see that it's an important subject for you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Okay. Moving on then. Budget outcomes and implications. So this is the fallout from yesterday, Nick. We've touched on the fact that the devil is in the detail, and we've yet to establish exactly what it means, not least in the amount of extra funding that local authorities are going to get, and the power and the effect of that. Anybody else got thought? Nick, did you want to just give your basic overthoughts on what happened yesterday?
Very happy to do that, and happy to give some sort of global figures. But again, we haven't yet got the detailed implication for EMCA, or indeed any of our colleague councils that sort of sit within the area. But I mean, overall, there were a number of areas that will probably lead to some further investment opportunity for us. I mean, it's obviously SPF has been mentioned, and the continuation of that, while it wasn't at 100%, it's still, I think, welcome that there's something coming through there, which is sort of relatively positive. On top of that, while we again don't know whether or not any of this may come through brownfield housing, because of course we currently get a grant to fund that. The government has identified a further £500 million for affordable housing across the nation, so that may be something that we'll keep an eye on in terms of how it impacts on us. Again, £200 million globally for what's called the city region transport, which we can dip into as well. So we'd expect some sort of allocation of that, but again, we don't know the exact amount that will come through there yet. I mentioned previously it was good that we had the East Midlands investment zone approved, which was positive. And the government also announced about £500 million as a new sort of pothole fund, if I can call it that, across the piece. And again, that will be, I'm sure, used effectively by the transport authorities within the area. Moving beyond that, in terms of passenger transport, which is obviously an area that we're taking a close look at, because of course we've got joint responsibility with the transport authorities around passenger transport now. The Department for Transport identified, I think, just over £900 million that will be available, and I think that they haven't yet said exactly how it's going to be allocated, but something along the lines of that will enable local authorities to ensure bus improvement is in place. That may replace the existing bus service improvement programme grant. It's a similar amount, maybe slightly less. Other than that, I think key issues that I picked out were additional funding in R&D. And I think the Chancellor did mention, actually, for the £1 billion that's going into aerospace, they actually picked out the East Midlands as an area that will benefit from that. But also there's £2 billion, I think, going into automotive, about £500 million going into life sciences, and more for the creative industries as well. And then probably beyond that, just to mention again something that the Chancellor mentioned as part of the £1.4 billion going into schools. I think she specifically picked on the Nursery Academy in Derby as one of the schools that will be rebuilt, which is obviously a local area for some people in the room, and certainly within the wider EMCA region. And again, I guess that's to be welcome, some additional funding to help schools and FE colleges, I understand as well, in terms of both maintenance and rebuild where required. But that I guess is pretty much it overall. The only other thing that we haven't got clarity on yet is the employers' NI changes, and whether there'll be some form of recompense for public sector organisations in terms of the additional costs that will come through from the changes to employers' NI, and we're still waiting for that. But that's pretty much a brief summary of what I've gleaned so far from yesterday. But of course, as I say, devil is in the detail, and we'll find a lot of that out over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Nick. Any thoughts on that or other items in the budget that you've picked up, Georgia?
Trams are obviously disproportionately impacted by the previous government's £2 bus cap and this government's £3 bus cap. has MCO discussed any ways it can support the tram as the bus fare cap has been continued?
I think obviously that will be part of the discussions that the East Midlands Command Authority will want to have as part of its budget setting process. It's started, but by no means finished.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously taking note. I think it's Manchester that's funding to keep it at £2.
Sorry, not used to having microphones. We don't have microphones or luxuries like this. I mean, Manchester, I think, is funding the bus fare cap to remain at £2, and I think they've also funded their tram in Nottingham, despite representations to the previous government from all areas with trams. The £2 cap was only applicable to buses, which meant that it was then not applicable to trams. The tram fare was obviously more expensive, so the tram loses out because people are getting the bus because it's cheaper. I mean, I think the £3 cap will go some way to sort of level it out, but it's still struggled over the year, and we've obviously seen other combined authorities step in to help, particularly their trams, in the light of a policy that doesn't really think about joined up public transport strategy, and would like to see that from MCA.
Right, yes. Do we still have separate transport boards, Nick? Are we? There was talk, certainly when I was involved, of establishing a regional transport board. Is that work ongoing?
There is certainly a transport committee as part of MCA, and that's an advisory committee, and that, I can't remember, Emma, when that meets. Is it today even? It is today, actually, yes. It is meeting today, and that will be looking at a whole set of issues in relation to transport, and that will then provide advice across to the board around those individual areas. So that, does that help to answer the question there? I think that committee is intended, hopefully, to coordinate much of the transport work across the region that MCA will take some responsibility for.
I guess it answers it in part, Nick, because I was the understanding that the region needs to develop a regional transport board to be able to attract the right funding from government, and that disparate and separate transport boards in the constituent authorities wouldn't attract that funding. I don't know if you know anything about that.
I must admit, I don't know the history around it. I do know that most combined authorities do have a single focus for transport within their areas, and that sometimes does help in relation to that particular focus. But I'm sorry, I don't know the history.
Thank you, Chair. Nick mentioned the Mercia Academy in Derby, and the Chancellor did indeed make that announcement in her speech. I wonder whether it might actually be the Mercia Academy in Newhall near Swadlincote that she meant.
Well, I don't know of a Mercia Academy in Derby City itself, so I think you're probably right. And if the Mercia Academy near Swadlincote is in poor condition, then I'm sure, I think it is. So it probably does mean that one.
My apologies, I was merely repeating the Chancellor's words.
Andy.
Yeah, just seeking a clarification prior to the setting up of East Midlands MCA. There was talk about this 1.5 billion in association with transport. So in relation to the budget announcements, I'm assuming that that's not available. It's not a thing. There was no mention about that. So I don't know whether, is that money still available in the pot? So that's one aspect to it. And then for the strategic transport policies that were announced in east-west sort of the Transpennine, I suppose it's one for our transport committee, is how were they successful in putting forward those strategic transport connectivity projects, you know, so that we might be ready for future rounds in the budget.
Thanks, Andy. I think that's what I'm referring to, and the need for a strategic transport board for the region to be able to attract that sort of funding, and that's where it needs to come to. Yes, Nick.
Thank you. I can certainly talk about the 1.5 billion and I think what may be, although we don't yet know the start of some of that. The 1.5 billion, I believe, is one of those figures that's over the lifetime of MCA, so the devolution deal was for 30 years. So my understanding it was 1.5 billion over 30 years, in the same way they talked about the investment fund being over $1 billion over 30 years, but 38 million each year. So in that situation, I guess we'd look to get something like £50 million each year of capital for transport. Now, as I said, I don't know how much will come our way, but they have identified, this would fall generally under the City Region Transport Fund, or CRSTS is a proper title. They've identified an extra £200 million of that nationally for this year. I don't know how much of that may come our way. That will be down to the Department of Transport. And of course, anything else down the track will come as part of the spending review when that comes along. So again, all we'll know at the moment is what might be coming in our direction for this next financial year and nothing beyond that. But that will be part of the spending review. And coming back to your points again, I think making sure and clearing the spending review how significant transport funding can really help to impact enormously the region for the benefit of all its communities, residents, businesses, I think it is an incredibly important task, not just for MCA, but for all of us to work on.
I just think it needs to be clarified because from Derby's, I quote Derby's position particularly, is that strategic transport is sort of on hold from the city's point of view, waiting to find out what effect and how MCA can influence it. So I think it's important it gets developed. Right, Nick, there was in the budget there was a shout out for West Midlands and Manchester in terms of support for further powers or scheme. I can't remember the title of it, but can you explain what that was and how far we are off? Is it off that sort of thing as a region?
So I think what you may be talking about is what's called the integrated funding settlement. That certainly, I think under the previous government as well, actually, West Midlands and Greater Manchester were identified as what they call trailblazer areas that were given additional powers. And effectively what that did for integrated settlement, it brings together a whole set of different funding streams, many of which at the moment local authorities and combined authorities limited what they can spend it on. So things like transport got to be spent on transport, skills got to be spent on skills, etc. through there. With the integrated settlement, effectively you get a pot of funding and it's then up to the individual organisation to decide how it wants to spend that money. So it's far less constrained. And it comes with a set of different accountabilities that you've got to then report back to government around. But it does actually give that flexibility, which is certainly something that most areas that have benefited from devolution would want. So they're the first two that have been given the powers. The government also identified a set of other combined authorities that will get those powers in 26-27. Now, it sets certain criteria for that, and one of the criteria is that in order for it to get the powers in 26-27, a combined authority has to be more than 18 months old. We are not more than 18 months old. So we do not fall within the sphere of 26-27 for integrated settlements. Hopefully, we may fall within that sphere for 27-28. But again, that'll be something that will come down the line, probably as part of the comprehensive spending review.
So this is one of the many powers that established combined authorities have gained over the years. And once we are established fully, we should be looking to reap the benefits in a similar way to the likes of West Midlands and Manchester. Yes, Joan.
In the budget announcement, there was yesterday, the Chancellor announced that she was going to scrap £100 million worth of capital and cultural levelling up funding that was made in the spring budget. And I'm aware that some of those were areas are in the East Midlands. I think High Peak was going to be one of the recipients. The Hucknall town deal might be at risk, and there was funding for Erewash as well, even possibly my own Bolsover. Have you done any analysis of that yet? Because I know she said that there will be a consultation before they are completely scrapped.
My apologies, because I say it only occurred yesterday, so we're still analysing everything, and I haven't yet had chance to look at the exact impact of that on all the constituent councils, but it is something that's on my radar, and hopefully by the time we get to Monday in the board, I will have done that. But as we sit here today, unfortunately not.
Page 83.
Thank you.
I think, unfortunately, there's no clarity yet on a number of things. Old funding, the levelling up funding, and the support for, I think it was 75 towns, wasn't it, who were going to benefit from some money under the levelling up funding. To me, there's no clarity on that, but they are very important to the likes of Long Eaton and other places where that funding is available. Conscious of time, Andy, just you want to come through?
Well, I think from my reading of it, the level 3 funding is gone, but the long-term plan for towns funding is going ahead. That's what I believe is true. And just to come back on the previous about the transport, 1.5 billion. The big cross-Pennine schemes and the East-West schemes, they're different, aren't they, though? They're individual projects, so I just want to make that clear that, you know, obviously the 1.5 billion and how that comes is to do with our strategic transport, but if we want specific things like, say, the Maid Marian line or extension of the Robin Hood line and things like that, they are different strategic schemes that the transport they'd put forward, wouldn't they? That's my question.
Certainly, that's my understanding at the moment of how the process will work. But of course, given a new government, they may decide to change that process. But that would certainly be my understanding at the moment of how that process would work, feeding into the spending review.
Yeah, because Supertram in Sheffield has got some allocations, so you know, big schemes like that.
Okay, I think we're about halfway through Monday's agenda. Is now a good time for a comfort break, because I can certainly do one. If we have 5 minutes, and we'll come back and deal with and move on to the housing fund allocations. Yeah, the brownfield housing. Ooh. Good. So we'll just finish off the agenda for Monday and then move on with the agenda. So the Brownfield Housing Fund allocations, that's actually, my reading of that is that it's to deal with some amendments to those that are already been agreed and are well down the process. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's absolutely correct. It's a report was taken, I think, through board in September and then onto the investment committee thereafter, which laid out the schemes that we were looking to invest in with the Brownfield Housing Fund, which is a fund that comes from government. There are certain constraints around it that we have to meet and criteria. And then following on from some more due diligence on those schemes, we've identified that some of them unfortunately don't meet those government criteria for investment. And we're now looking to put in replacement schemes that will enable us to utilise the full funding of 16.8 million by the end of the next financial year.
Okay, and I think there is quite a widespread across the region of projects that are being supported of different amounts, but probably equally valuable to those local communities. So there's been some quite quick work done on those allocations. I think probably there were some in the pipeline already, and that shows the value of having reserves, isn't it? I suppose, in terms of a pipeline for doing things. Any comments on the funding allocations or these amendments that are going in, David?
Oh, just a question, really. Are the district councils and the other borough councils being told about this opportunity for funding, or is it something that they need to read the minutes?
Again, I'm not close to the operation, but my understanding is that details were sent out to all potentially interested parties at the start of this to ask for, and that would include, I think, district and borough councils as well as actually developers, to ask for any applications. And there were a number of applications that came in across the piece. So my understanding is that we did, but I can't absolutely guarantee that because I wasn't in charge of the operations for it.
Okay, but I was just thinking of if there's funding become available, then that they need to know about that, really, don't they? So,
yeah. I think there was a general call for bids for the funding, and it was an open one. I think there's 2 private developers got funding in Derby, for example, itself. So I guess I don't know if it was highlighted to the districts, but it certainly was a public announcement. Yes. I'll bring in a second, Andy. Yeah, Georgia.
I was just going to say on the list, there's lots of districts and some of the district councils are actually the developers. So I would assume that if they're the ones developing it, they were told about it.
Yeah, it's like a marker going forward. It almost seems a bit of a dark art being successful for brownfield funding in terms of the amounts that are allocated and the timelines and when you have to start on site. It's just a marker going forward when we're thinking about how we're going to do it in the East Midlands Combined Authority, that there's clarity and openness, for opportunity, as opposed to some of these fallen foul because of delay in when they start on site, when they finish. There doesn't always seem to be enough flexibility that reflects the current construction market and, the timeline for redesign and then delays in construction periods. So I think that's just something we should be mindful of.
I think timeliness in a lot of these funding things, Andy, is important. The criteria that's set in the beginning gives a date and a completion date, and if there's no prospect or little prospect of you meeting that date because of planning or whatever, you're unlikely to get on the list anyway. But hopefully we can look at doing that in a slightly different way, Nick.
Absolutely. I think that the issue for us is that we're constrained, as I mentioned previously, by the criteria that come from government on this one, from the department. And I don't believe we're alone in that. I think so. From my understanding of talking to other male combined authorities, I think there's a sense that actually, it'd be nicer to have more flexibility around this. And certainly, as we talked about integrated settlements before, certainly for Greater Manchester and West Midlands, they will have that flexibility, is my understanding, moving forward about it. But again, we will try to continue to make our case to the department that we want more flexibility on this one in particular, because you're right, there are some things that just constrain us a little bit in terms of some of the schemes that otherwise would have been very good, we can't fund.
Okay, I'm going to move on then to the recruitment update. I think you're all probably aware of the appointment of the new chief executive. I don't know much about. Is there any feedback, Emma? Anything we would want to say at this point about our new chief exec?
Nothing at this point. There is a report that is going to board on Monday. It is currently exempt, so I would not really wish to say anything further.
I appreciate the recruitment side of things is on the exempt section for Monday's meeting, so we can't go into detail. But I think there's good progress been made on it, and obviously to establish the combined authority and have it running effectively, then full appointments rather than interim appointments are important. Okay. I don't think there's much more we can say on that subject at this particular time then. So the next one is contract procedure rules. I think my reading again is that this is establishing the procedure rules and the procurement, possibly the procurement rules for the authority going forward. It looks to me very similar to those rules that govern most local authorities. Nick, I don't know if you want to say if there's any major differences.
No, I'll be fairly brief on this one. I think that since inception, we have used Nottinghamshire County Council's contract procedure rules. They're a very good set of procedure rules. They work really, really well for local authorities, but we're governed slightly differently. We've got different regulations in place, and therefore we just sometimes butt up against slight issues around that. So we've taken those, we've reworked them into a set that works for combined authorities, looking at other combined authorities, and that's effectively what's in front of the board on Monday to approve. The other thing that we're cognizant of is that things will need to change next February when the new procurement bill comes into force, and we'll need to bring another set of contract procedure regulations through at that stage. But we've got to a position now where we're starting to procure quite a bit, and we feel it's important for us to have something that we can rely on rather than the Nottinghamshire ones, which are very good, but actually there are some issues just in terms of their link to a combined authority. And the other point to raise is that we're looking very strongly on this one. They do facilitate strong social value, and we'd hope to come back to the board sometime in the spring with further details around how we can make sure that all our procurement activities maximise social value. That'll be a key part of the new procurement bill as well, so it will link to our response to that.
And I think it's an important thing in terms of openness and transparency and governance. And I would suggest that maybe the Audit and Accounts Committee would look at the detail on that.
That's certainly within their remit.
Any thoughts, questions? Andy?
Yeah, and the other element on the contract procedures is wanting the EMCA to be like the green centre of England. So having elements that really measure the impact with regard to low carbon and all that being built in to kind of get that messaging out there. And really, if that goes out as part of the contract procedures, you're actually building that added value in at a competitive stage. And the other is around what you'd call let's call it East Midlands community wealth building, so that there's an emphasis on local contract and suppliers. Obviously, there's a limitation to that, but strong messaging about wanting the skills agenda to be from and the money spent within the East Midlands.
Okay. Good, thank you. Moving on then, LEP closure. As I said previously, I was a member of the LEP for a considerable time. Again, my understanding is that moves are afoot to wind the LEP business up. There's a list in the papers of items that can't be concluded by the time it's wound up, and responsibilities will fall on the combined authority. There's an element of funding that will be transferred, £380,000 already allocated to the growth side of things. How much other funding Nick, do you know, will come with the closure of the LEP? There's some loan loans outstanding which will be repaid, and they presumably will come to the combined authority.
They will. Any loans that are effectively recycled back will come back into the coffers of the combined authority to then be used again for other purposes in relation to economic development through there. So there'll be some of those undoubtedly that come through, and there'll be other assets as well. I think there's it's been identified. There's a number of ring-fenced reserves as well that we anticipate coming across, and we hope to be in a position whereby the vast majority of the agreement in relation to this is finalised over the course of the next few weeks. So it's more of a position paper rather than a...
Right, I did read a proposed or a timescale for the total winding up. I can't remember the date. Was it September next year? Or...
I believe we're looking sometime into next year. I can't remember the exact date, but the vast majority of all the assets and the activities will have transferred well before the end of this financial year. And I think we're looking at, the bulk of those to be in place by December.
Okay, so the combined authority will effectively take over the role that LEPs were doing that's still existing. We're not, the authority is not going to be a new LEP. It's just going to be absorbed into what what MCA does, and probably rightly so. But I think some of the staff have transferred, and we've utilised the experience and knowledge that was there within the LEP.
That's correct. I mean, all the permanent staff who were with the former D2N2 LEP have transferred into the county combined authority, and are operating effectively now. And have been. I think their transfer date was sometime back in June. It's before I started, but that's certainly been the case. So staff have already transferred. It's simply about the rest of the activities, the assets as well now.
I think that knowledge and experience is very useful and slotted in quite nicely. So, any questions on the LEP? Yes, Abby.
Thank you, Chairman. Ostensibly, one of the key rationales or raison d'etre of the LEP was the public-private sector partnership that guided through the board. Where, if anywhere, is that private sector input reflected in the new proposals vis-à-vis MCA?
If I can comment, and then Emma may wish to comment as well from a sort of governance perspective. The key aim is that the business board, effectively, Business Advisory Board, will provide that, and David Williams, I believe they chair that board, and his colleagues on there will provide that strong business voice into MCA itself. And of course, he has the role as well on the main board.
I think that's positive because David's got a lot of experience and a lot of past presence within the LEP. He was the deputy chair, I think, and knows all of the business community that were involved in the LEP, and hopefully a lot of that experience and knowledge will transfer with him to the business board. Yeah. Any other questions on the LEP? No? Okay, so MCA committees consider and agree proposed amendments to the Constitution and note amendments to the Constitution by the monitoring officer under delegated authority. Anybody picked anything up important in that, or is it just a procedural thing, Emma?
Yeah, it's more of a procedural thing. There was just a couple of things that were considered. One was a slight amendment to the Audit and Governance Committee, made a slight amendment to the whistleblowing policy, and at the Skills and Employment Committee, they considered a recommendation to approve the top slice of 2% of the adult skills fund budget to be taken to provide management and administration costs. And that was on 2 weeks ago, committee then.
Okay, so it's feeding back any changes that need to be made, and I guess in the establishment of the authority there will be one or two of those changes that's necessary. So, good. I think that completes the agenda for Monday. My understanding, Emma, is that we have the opportunity to make comment or recommendations to the board as a scrutiny board, but this is one of the things about the timings of the meetings, because if we did make significant recommendations today to put to the board on Monday, there'd be very little time for you to prepare that and disseminate it to the board. So, your thoughts on that?
I'm not entirely sure what the mechanism is, but it's something that I will obviously take away. I've taken extensive amounts of notes for today, and if I've got to turn it around pretty quickly, then that'll be my weekend. If not, I will report back to you and let you know how best to proceed with that, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that needs clarifying because, and I know that scrutiny boards across the region, across the country will operate differently, but I'm going on my scrutiny board, and we review the cabinet papers in advance of the meeting, and very often have recommendations to make to cabinet in formal writing that are considered as an agenda item on the board meetings. So I think for the purpose of effective scrutiny, then that needs to be in the future. That needs to be made available to us to do. Are there any items that we've gone through and discussed that anybody would feel we would want to make a recommendation or comment to the board on at this point?
A general comment on it, because we're not included in the exempt papers, and I would argue that we're not ordinary member of the public, so we are the scrutiny board for that. And we also had the situation where you made the point about the exempt item that is coming on the agenda, and you are not allowed to speak about it. But if you go up on the MCA website, it already says that Amy Harhoff is set to be the first permanent chief executive. So there's sort of an inconsistency and stupidity about that. We not allowed to talk about it, but it's there on the website.
And it is, in terms of updates in recruitment and stuff, it's interesting to me and to the board probably. But if it was an exempt item that we should consider, then we should have on our agenda the opportunity to, at the end of the meeting, to consider exempt items. Yeah.
Sorry, I understand that a press release has been released. I'm aware of that. I'm just overly cautious, perhaps, if a report is still referred to as being exempt. I didn't particularly want to refer to it just in case. Just because I am overly cautious.
I absolutely get that, Emma, but my point is that the exempt item might be something more significant that the board, that this committee would want to consider.
Yeah.
So there should be room for it on the agenda at the end of the meeting.
So, sorry, just to clarify, the Constitution does state that no member of no view and scrutiny committee or subcommittee is entitled to a copy of any such document or part of a document as contains exempt or confidential information unless that information is relevant to an action or decision that the member is reviewing or scrutinising, or any review contained in any programme of work of the committee or subcommittee. So if you have put something on your forward plan or your work programme, and you need to see the entirety of all the papers to be able to make any recommendations to your board or any decision like that, then that's what it means. Yeah. So I think it's just, if you are scrutinising a decision, you would be entitled to it.
So if there's something that we consider we might want to, you and I can discuss whether it fits that criteria and whether we can put it on our agenda.
Yes, and we can also take the advice of the monitoring officer as well, who will be able to provide additional information.
Nick, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that's probably covered it there. I was just going to make the point that my experience of other combined authorities is, within the bounds of exactly what Emma talked about there often is the ability to move into exempt session, but it needs to be something that obviously focuses on the work of the Review and Scrutiny Committee rather than anything else. But yes, we can take that away and talk to Jodie Townsend about it, can't we, as a monitoring officer?
Okay.
I think I'd like to have, from this committee, to take a recommendation that we do get to see the exempt papers and change the constitution. Because you can't not know what you're not talking about.
Sorry, Joan, there will be a title and a short paragraph in relation to what it is, what the exempt item is. And maybe that the process might be for Jodie and I and Boyd to consider it and to see if we do get the opportunity to see that exempt item at the end of our meeting. The recommendation to say that we should see all exempt items would fall because there is that criteria, I think. Jodie?
Sorry, just to clarify as well, I think as far as I'm aware, if there were reports that you specifically wanted to see, you would be able to not apply, but request, that's the better word, a request from the monitoring officer, exempt reports, and it would be on a sort of, not a need-to-know basis, but it wouldn't just be a generic, here's all the exempt reports. It would be, okay, this is, this may help you in your decision-making. I think that's should be worth adding as well.
So maybe if it is potentially something controversial, we should be looking at it from a scrutiny point of view, and that would give us the right to see the exempt material. Andy.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that I think the comments made feeding in from today's Review and Scrutiny meeting should be reported back to the meeting because we've started off, I know we're only just starting out, but we had an Overview and Scrutiny meeting in the summer when things had been decided and we turned up and there was no agenda. So I think it kind of makes a mark that, the whole point of us having this meeting is to feedback and for things to be discussed in the main meeting and those things considered. So I hope we can do that.
I'm sure Emma has taken some detailed notes and will talk to the monitoring officer, whoever, about that. But the next item on the agenda, of course, is forward plans and discussing our own work programme. And I think there are some items on the agenda that I've made a note of that we can add value by looking into those items in a bit more detail, and that would be probably the point where we would submit recommendations and views and reports, even possibly on the items that we scrutinised. I'm absolutely all for, and that's why I'm talking about the timing, for us as a scrutiny board, if we have a serious recommendation to put, we need to have the opportunity and the facility to do it. And that might affect the time in the meeting. Do you want to come back on that first?
Yes, sorry. So I was just going to say that the agenda for board has obviously been published. So I'm not, because it has already been published, I'm not sure what the mechanism is because we can't add to the agenda to say, the feedback from scrutiny. So I will find a way in which the committee's views are expressed. However, it might not be for this committee on the 4th of November that it will be exactly how it will be going forwards. I'll obviously try and try to speak to Jodie to see if there's some way in which the agenda can be made a little more flexible to allow you to have your points made from scrutiny.
I think it's essential that we do have the ability to make recommendations to put to the board in the same way as we do with Cabinet, to make them, to ensure that they consider the views and the recommendations and do what they will in terms of accepting or noting or refusing the recommendation. But I think we need that ability. Abby, you got a view on that?
Yes, well, just to reinforce that, I mean, what have we spent the last 2 hours doing, going through all these papers, and in my case, and probably others, travelling an hour and a half here and back, if just out of interest we've had a discussion about these papers, but none of it will become meaningful in terms of being translated back to the board. Now, I recognise this one occasion, this is our first formal meeting, the timings might be slightly off, but I'm not sure why we've spent 2 hours discussing the papers if the board's not going to get to know any of our comments or any of the themes that we have raised.
Absolutely get that, Abby, but I hope that we can have the opportunity to set a work programme for ourselves to look at some of these items where we can consider them and add value, and at that point put recommendations to the board or to whoever, to the monitoring officer or whoever. Georgia.
The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government have updated their overview and scrutiny statutory guidance. So now it's statutory guidance for councils, combined authorities and combined county authorities. And it says in here, I will just get to the right page. That there's a presumed right to any scrutiny member to access exempt items. So we should have access to exempt items, and we should be able to discuss them in closed sessions if we want to.
In that case, I think we're certainly going to need clarification from the monitoring officer on the subject. Nick?
I'm very happy to get that clarification. The only thing I would say is I have worked for another combined authority not that long ago where this issue came up underneath that particular thing, and there were some particular items that I think had legal issues attached to them where it was deemed that it wouldn't be correct for the overview scrutiny to have access to them. So therefore, we just need to be quite careful, I think, in terms of how we frame that. And that was taking account of that. It says that there's a presumed right, but not a right in every single circumstance. And that therefore we just need to, we'll take advice from the monitoring officer again, it's his decision, not mine. But again, there may need to be some constraints in relation to it. I'm just aware from other organisations.
I think the problem of what's happening here is there's a presumed right that we don't have access to it. So it's reasonable if there's a valid reason that we wouldn't have access to it for that to be justified to us and for explain the reason. That's not what's happened here. What's happened here is that it's been presumed that we don't have the access to it.
Yeah, the presumption is reversing, doesn't it? That we can have access it unless there are circumstances that's explained to us. Kevin?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'd like to think these are just teething problems, as it were, because this is really our first effective meeting, but they are genuine issues, and if they're not resolved, I think it will cause some problems in the way we work. So it is something we need to revisit, and again, it's something that you as chair now need to take it away, and we can have, hopefully, resolve these issues so that the next time we have a meeting, it has some merit to it, because if we're having to make choices between going to different meetings because they clash with other meetings, and this one we just sit here, we talk about it, and then nothing happens, I think that might determine which meetings people begin to go to.
Yeah, good point.
Thanks, Chair. Can I suggest that we publish minutes of this meeting and circulate those to the board as a matter of course, and ask for a change in the standing orders for the board so that they receive our minutes as an agenda item, and in addition to that, a covering note for the minutes with any particular recommendations. And out of this meeting, I think the particular recommendation is the one to refer back the exclusion of the items that we are excluded from seeing to the monitoring officer for review, for a revision, so that it becomes a positive statement rather than a negative statement of some sort of thing.
Thank you, David. Yes, I absolutely agree. But Emma, is there a need for a recommendation on that basis, or would it be adequate for you and me to speak to the monitoring officer and get that view?
I think it would probably be better for us to speak to the monitoring officer. In terms of circulating the minutes, I think it might be more valuable, perhaps, if there is information extracted from the minutes, so that my fear is if you end up with 6 pages of minutes, it's not always...
And else they'll have to read.
Yeah,
but that's the important part
yeah.
of that then, is to have the ability to add on to those minutes recommendations from them for them
Yeah.
to direct
And to extract it so that it's very plain and very simple. Sorry, if I could, Chair, sorry. Nick was just saying that Jodie will be able to give a verbal update at the committee on Monday, which it's not ideal, I admit, but it is a mechanism to allow you to, or to allow the committee to, voice its concerns and its point of views that have been raised today.
Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Just while we're on minutes, I assume the minutes from this meeting will be in the agenda for the next meeting to be passed. Yep. May I ask that the minutes from the meeting, the formal meeting we held in July, are also included in that agenda?
I will either locate them or write them, but yes, they will be.
Yes, I think for openness, transparency and completeness, we need to include the minutes to be considered at each committee meeting.
I think Alec Dubberley from the Derbyshire County Council actually.
Yeah, I think he was. I have checked the website, and I'm in contact with Alec on numerous occasions, but I will check with him and see if there's been any progress. And as soon as I've found them, I will ask for them to be published on the website and can circulate to all members.
Okay, so if I can move on then to the last item, the work programme, effectively. And what's suggested is that we look at the forward plan as well as other considerations as to what we might want to have a more deep dive into to get that value, Kevin, to make it purposeful, make them purposeful meetings. So my first comment really is in relation to the forward plan that was issued on the 2nd of October. In my view, that's not a forward plan. All that is a list of agenda items for all the meetings that occur, and that's not the purpose of a forward plan. And the regulations that have been adopted call for the authority to issue a forward plan with 6 months in advance, wherever possible, a minimum of 28 days in advance, and to publish reports in the timely fashion prior to the meetings. So they were circulated, the reports for this meeting and for the board meeting were circulated. But in terms of the public, openness, transparency for the public to see what's coming up, the forward plan needs to be a proper forward plan, and that would help us to inform our work programme and look at what it is that's coming up, that according to the directions that we've been given, to look at where we can offer positive scrutiny and give meaningful outcomes and feedback from the work of the committee to encourage, as Kevin says, to encourage us all to keep coming and get something out of what we're doing here today. David,
I was going to say exactly the same point that you made.
Okay. Thoughts on that, Jodie? What do you think of what do we think of the forward plan as it is now?
So, yeah, I can understand the criticism, constructive criticism. Ideally, we would like to get to a stage as an organisation, definitely from a governance point of view, where we are, and I hate the term horizon scanning, but, looking towards the future for the next 6 months. Sometimes it's it's quite difficult because obviously there's going to be moving and, items will move up and down in terms of importance or, timings. But concerted efforts are being made. Do you get as much effort and to get as many people to populate the forward plan as much in advance as possible?
I get the difficulties of it being new and we're getting up and running, getting established and things, but there are certain items that with timescales built in that you could abstract and put them into a forward plan as to what, so decisions around investment fund spending and the budgets and things like that. We know when they are going to planned to be considered and brought before the board. It might change, they might slip, they might come forward, whatever, but just to give us and give people a view of what it is the combined authority is doing. Is that in line with everybody else's thinking? Okay. You take that feedback back and we'll perhaps talk about that with Boyd and myself as well. Okay. So, talking work programme and making meaningful scrutiny meetings, what is it that people might like to look at, get reports on, get people to attend to talk to us about the detail of any of this business of the combined authority? Anybody got things in mind? Can I go through what I thought about as we've gone through the agenda? Things like the housing fund brownfield housing fund allocations are more or less done and dusted, aren't they? They've been looked at, decided. There's some amendments to them. There are substitutes in the pilot, whatever. I don't think we can add much to that because that will have been considered. But things like the Inclusive Growth Commission, for example, we heard from Michael earlier on how that's being established and how they're considering their consultation. I think we should be a part of that. I think we should have the opportunity to put some input into their considerations, and that maybe it can be at our next informal meeting that we ask for a report, progress report or whatever, and maybe somebody from the commissioners or the chair of the commissioners or something to come to tell us and get feedback from us. Is that something we could usefully put on the agenda, the work programme? And is that happened?
Yeah, does that include the MCA assurance framework that's connected? Because we spoke about it, didn't we, during the meeting? And
my understanding was the commissioners will look to set up in line with the assurance framework and the strategy. Sorry, Nick.
I'm just going to make the point that at the moment we've got an assurance framework that's sort of set up and operates anyway. We're changing that, but the time we change that is, there might be differences in terms of when it's best for review and scrutiny to actually engage with that. It's obviously important you engage with it early, but it may be almost too early now because we haven't yet got the Inclusive Growth Commission up and running around those areas. So perhaps if I can take that away and talk to Judy Townsend on it, who's developing that in terms of what would be the best time for review and scrutiny to look at that. It may be that it's a little bit too early now, I think.
Sorry? Absolutely. Yeah, we can ask anybody we like really to come to the meeting. It's about timeliness. If it might not fit with our next informal meeting, it might be too early in general for that, but if we've got it on the work programme, you can fit it in as and when.
Sorry, did you want JD to come to the next formal or informal meeting or both?
Well, the meeting around the commission perhaps, and then
okay,
and then sort of field questions around anything else that we've discussed. Kevin.
Chris, I'm not suggesting it goes on the agenda for the next meeting, but at the appropriate time, in your judgment, when you're constructing the agenda, I'd be interested to hear a bit more about the transport function and how that affects communities, and so that we can begin to feed into that as it's developed.
Okay, I'm sure Jodie's making a note of these as we go along. Yes, I agree, Kevin. The transport arrangements are going to be massive and significant, and there's a lot to do to get us to a point where we've got a strategic transport board and can make effective decisions on that. So, yes, at some point that would be appropriate to come, I'm sure. Sorry, Abby, yeah?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't know how other members of the committee feel, but I think that some part of our work programme shouldn't just be about chasing what EMCA are producing. In other words, some cross-cutting and thematic stuff that they might pull together for us to be able to look at and advise on. So in terms of, for example, the relationship between all the different strategies, the hierarchy of the strategic decision-making, I would, if others agree, I think it would be helpful for us to understand and have an overview of how EMCA intends to manage all of these plans and ensure that they are working with each other, complement each other, talk to each other. And the other thing, which I alluded to before, in terms of comms, EMCA's got a job of work to do to communicate out there what this new authority is, where it fits into things, and how it's going to consult and engage with all the stakeholders. I think is quite important. We are one of those, each as a constituent, not using the official term, but each as a member of this committee, and this committee as a whole need engaging with. But there's a whole raft of public engagement and other sort of stakeholder engagements, and I'd like to understand how EMCA intends to manage the complexity of all of the different organisations it intends to both communicate with and consult with. I think it would be useful for us to challenge that and understand it.
Scribing furiously. I'll give her a second to catch up. Yes, I absolutely get that. We got circulated a copy of the EMCA strategy. What's the document called? The framework strategy, and that was the first time. I'll be honest, that's the first time I've seen it, and it might be useful to go through, for somebody to go through that with us. I mean, there are all the mechanisms, and I mean, Andy put some questions which you obviously spent some time answering, but it did give us the opportunity to see that strategy framework. And so there's the opportunity for board members to do that in advance of meetings. And Emma provided a very comprehensive response to that. So yeah, that could well be an item for consideration on the agenda, yeah? And Boyd and I and yourself will decide, look to see where these things fit in and the timings on them. Because the other one I was thinking about was what we heard about the investment fund and the development of a pipeline for that. And that's different to the brownfields sites in that those haven't been decided yet. And we could possibly look at some of those potential pipeline ones and to give our thoughts and advice and see how it fits with the strategy to make sure that we're doing an inclusive strategy in relation to that. So the investment fund pipeline might be of interest to us. Nick.
Thank you. And I think that would be timely to do probably as part of both the informal in November and the formal in December, because that will inform an important part of the budget setting and the medium-term financial plan, which of course is part of your work programme, I think, anyway, moving into the November informal meeting and December formal one. So it's so we can make sure those two are linked together.
Right. Good. Are we agreed on that one, David?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I had a look at the strategic framework this morning before I came to the meeting, and well, it struck me that it is an outline at this stage, and there is a lot of work that will need to be done to bring that to a detailed plan and implementation plan. So I can see that will fit in. The work associated with that will need to be planned out at a board level, and then our work programme will probably fit into that, the strategic plan work programme, because a lot of the decisions that will be made will come out of that strategic plan. So if we're looking at ourselves as having input into the strategic plan, we can do it at the moment at a very high level, but it will be at the more detailed level where probably the changes we might proposed changes. At this level, it looks like
we could go back to it when it's further developed, can't we?
We can, yes, exactly. And our work programme can fit in with the programme of the implementation programme for the strategic plan.
I think Emma's going to have cramp by the time we're done. But, she's going, Andy.
Yeah, I'm with Abby a little bit because so we've got the 6 different delivery plans, but then you've got specific committees that are looking at them in detail. So, let's just using the transport as an example. If there's already a detailed committee looking at transport, it's almost looking at the recommendations that have come out from the detailed work that's been done already that we should then scrutinise, because we don't want to, repeat, it's like our ideas on the transport plan after there's been a detailed work done by that committee. So I think that's an important part, because we don't want to, it'd be counterproductive.
I agree, Andy. We don't want to duplicate anything.
No, don't duplicate.
People have got roles within these various committees, and the board itself have got a specific role. But if we can input whilst they're making that decision, then we can review what the outcome is and what the eventual decision is. But I don't want to duplicate anything that anybody else is doing. But I, as chair, and I think probably all of you as members, want to understand it so that we can have proper input.
So that's a flow of information that comes from those. Then we can consider that as part of our...
Okay, the last one I picked out of the discussions today was around the shared prosperity funding. And I'm sure the districts would welcome the idea of a hybrid approach, but they probably need to understand more of the detail when the detail becomes available. And if it's not done, and if we're not clear on what's come out of the budget or what the plan is for the combined authority to deal with the shared prosperity funding and existing programmes, then we can give our input and thoughts on that in terms of how they are priorities and the effectiveness of them. Andy and I talked briefly about the value of that funding, and there might be a recommendation to deal with that before they move on to other funding streams and how it changes, and understand how it's changing. So further detailed information in relation to the Shared Prosperity Fund programme, if you like. Is that sensible to consider that, do you think? Good. Any other items that you'd want to think about putting on the forward plan, our forward plan at this point? No? Good. Have you got all that, Jodie? We can discuss it in a bit more detail, and we'll work out the how it goes from there.
Members of the public, if the move, like you said, move it around a lot, how doesn't members of the public they need to make plans to get their deals? If you've got someone from Nottinghamshire, are they going to travel to today?
I think it's important for us to consider the location for ourselves, but absolutely we need to consider the availability for the public. I suspect there might be more public interest and contribution in the board than you will get at the Overview and Scrutiny Board, but it absolutely should be a consideration. And they have the opportunity to submit the questions or in writing, don't they, and not actually attend and get a reply.
Well, members of the public can attend this meeting. Obviously, when the agenda is published, it does include the location and time. I appreciate it would be helpful if that was on our website earlier. Obviously, I'm still working through getting suitable locations, because obviously we want to be able to webcast them. We want to be able to have things, accessible by transport, and obviously we know the issues.
It might fuel the argument that of reducing the number of venues to be considered, because then the public will get used to which one it's going to be or where it's going to be as well. But again, we can have that discussion when we go. So the next formal meeting is the 12th of December, and we've got no venue for that yet. What's your thoughts on that, Hannah?
So I think we do have a provisional venue. Just bear with me.
I think the mood music I'm picking up from this committee is that the likes of Newark probably wouldn't be a preferred venue. It would involve a lot of training, travelling for people and the public.
I think as well, with it being the 12th of December, I have to be a bit careful not to go in. I don't want to have it somewhere snowy or impenetrable by car or transport. Obviously, if there's snowflakes on the line, there could be chaos. So, yeah, that is just something that I will have to consider. Sorry, if you just bear with me, I'll have a look at meeting dates. So on the 12th of December, I've provisionally got Error Wash Council booked.
What's Georgia?
Just
There are more buses to Long Eaton than there are to Matlock.
Well, it won't take 2.5 hours. Can we just, will we be looking at meeting dates before then? So I give my apologies for them because we've got health scrutiny again.
Right. I think what we said, Georgia, was we'd put an email out asking all the committee members for their problems in relation to the existing dates and the location from where you're travelling, and we can consider it then.
I mean, I guess in terms of public transport, and I think it's important that we consider that not just from a personal point of view of needing to get a bus, where this combined authority has a responsibility over public transport, so there's no point holding our own meetings where people can't get to. It's far easier for people to travel into a central location than it is to come in and out again. I don't know if that's, I mean, Nottingham I don't think has capacity to host it anyway, so I'm not suggesting Nottingham, but I think there are other places like Derby City, Nottinghamshire County Council, Chesterfield. It's far easier to get to those bigger places with better transport than it is to go city to village. And that's the same with Erewash as well. So I would ask that that's something that we consider.
Yeah,
yeah, obviously I completely understand and I agree with everything that you've said. When I was brought in to do the job, my geographical knowledge of this area and the public transport is not great. So it's something that I will be considering in future. And I think also, not just in terms of, councillors, I think in terms of members of the public being able to access meetings, there's no point having, opportunities for them to participate if they can't actually get to the meetings. And, we want to engage as much as we can with members of the public. So every effort will be made to make them more accessible, via public transport in the future.
Whilst we're at this discussion around this date, the 12th of December, how does that fit with the next board meeting?
The next board is the 16th. It's the following Monday.
It's the same scenario then, isn't it? And we've already talked about that, not giving us and you much time to come up with meaningful recommendations to put and get them to see them in advance for the Monday. We'll have that discussion. It might just be bringing it forward a few days, might take us out of the conflicts with other meetings that the committee members have got and give us more time to be able to do what we need to do. Okay? Good. I think that just about completes the agenda. We don't have any other business, do we? But thank you for making your way here today. We'll try and address these issues with Boyd and Emma and myself. But if nothing else, I think it was a useful conversation in terms of establishing how the board's going to operate.